everybody, and welcome to DisruptED TV, where every little idea can make a big difference in your classroom or your school. And our guest today is Steve Heisler, who is the author of The Missing Link. I'm going to do our audience a favor and hold it up over my face. The Missing Link. We'll get into your background a little later, but let's start with the whole point of the book, the Teaching and Learning Critical Success Skills.
Right.
Before the program, Steve, you were telling us it's more than just critical thinking, so maybe you can start with that.
Well, critical thinking is a part of anybody's success, the ability to think, the ability to express yourself, the ability to solve problems. But there are a series of skills that all successful people share. And it goes across the board, and success at anything, not just financial success, or I mean the ability to farm something, the ability to fix a car. All these things involve a series of an ability of a person to be able to make decisions, to organize, to be persistent, to self-regulate, to manage time, and mostly the ability to be able to interact appropriately. And we teach these things, but we mostly teach them at home. And kids that come to school with these abilities are almost always successful in school. In fact, what you see is kids that have these success abilities, how they test out in kindergarten in relationship to the other kids in their class in almost every school in the United States, how they test out in relationship to each other in kindergarten is how they test out in relationship to each other in senior year of high school.
Wow.
Kid that's number one in his class is usually number one, because if you come to school with these success skills, you are going to be successful in school. And teachers expect them, but we don't really teach them. Not in the way that we teach other kinds of things. Teachers teach them individually, but not with this cohesive approach to thinking about these skills as being critical and necessary to help kids become, and correct me if I'm wrong, the number one thing that every school mission has: independent, lifelong learners. If you don't have success skills, you cannot be an independent, lifelong learner.
Yeah, that's so important. So I'm going to tick them off. I need to be able to make intelligent choices. I need to be able to organize my work. I need to persevere in the face of adversity.
Right.
I need to regulate my own behavior and my own activities. I need to learn how to manage my time. That's probably something I should read this book about. That would be great. And I also need how to relate to others, need to know how to relate to others. Now, your book...
In an appropriate way.
In an appropriate way. And now your book doesn't teach these skills. It teaches teachers how to teach these skills. Isn't that right?
It does. It does.
Okay, so it's really aimed at the people who watch our program, educators.
And it's also aimed at parents, because the number one place that this needs to be learned is at home. Technically, we shouldn't be teaching these in school. However, here's the problem. If you don't learn them at home, where in the hell are you going to learn them?
No, that's a good point.
Right. So if the school doesn't pick up the slack, if the school doesn't say these critical skills are necessary for helping students become lifelong learners, lifelong success, able to manage their learning, able to manage their lives in successful, meaningful ways. And again, success is how you perceive success, not how I perceive success for you.
Okay,
right?
Great.
If you don't have those skills and you don't learn them in school, you don't learn them. And the problem is, and when we talk about disenfranchised groups of kids, kids that tend to not have these skills taught at home are taught by are raised by parents who generally don't have these skills either. Successful parents tend to raise successful kids. You know, it's not just they're fixing things for kids, they're teaching kids how to use these skills by example or by direct instruction in order to be successful.
But they have to have those skills themselves.
Absolutely.
Well, they do. I mean, you really, that's an important point.
Right.
So it's really because it's teaching by example more than anything.
Right.
So you need to show and behave in a way that expresses that these competencies will make a difference in your life because you see it make a difference in mine.
Absolutely.
And I think that is a real super powerful message.
I think.
So people who are watching our program, let's say teachers for the most part, I mean, that's obviously a big part of our audience. What they'll learn from your book is how to live the kind of life that students will perceive, learners will perceive, as good role models for these kinds of skills and behaviors?
Well, absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
and I'm not going to get into this too much, but there are, students are supposed to, we want students to learn these success skills, but teachers have to behave in a certain way in order to teach them.
Okay.
One of those things is exemplifying
Right.
these behaviors. Exemplifying is so important. The other part, and there's several other things here, one of the key skills that teachers need to start doing is becoming facilitators rather than directors. Because the thing about all these success skills, and this is the really cool part, everybody already has them. Everybody has these abilities to some degree. If you look at persistence, for instance, everybody has persistence. Everybody, 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 everybody. It's not something you learn. It's something you learn to direct, right? If you're hungry and you start crying and you're a 3-year-old, what are you doing? You're being persistent,
Right.
right? It's, you know, but the thing is that what we tell kids is we tell them be persistent, right? Which is great, we want to do that. But here's the thing, persistence doesn't live in a vacuum. Persistence doesn't exist without something to persist for. So in order to get a kid to persist, you need to take a step back. You've got to engage with the student in a facilitative way, the way good parenting engages with students in a facilitative way. And you ask them, what is it that you want? And what do you need to do today to get to that thing that you may want several steps down the road? I tell you, you want to go to college. You want to go to college. Great. You want to go to college. For you to go to college, you need to do well in English. I know you don't like English class, but you need to do well in English. If I change that dynamic and I ask you a simple question, what is it you want to do after high school? What would you like to do? I'm asking you that question. What would you like to do after high school? You look like you're a high school student.
He does.
Right. Well, I'd like to make my life as successful as possible.
Doing what? What do you see yourself doing like after you graduate from high school in order to be more successful?
Becoming a great salesman.
Great salesman. Okay, so great. So we're talking about social interactions, right? And I see you being very resistant to me, but let me ask you a quick question. How does resisting me, how does fighting with me over small inconsequential things help you become a great salesman? Does it or doesn't it?
Well, I don't know yet.
Right? So you think salesmen are people who fight with others, or they learn how to get along?
They learn how to get along.
Oh,
That's a great
so
point.
let's talk about how you can start working on developing those skills so that when you are done with school and you start becoming a salesman, you have in place these tremendous skills that are going to help you be a successful salesman.
That are going to make you persuasive, help
Right.
you learn to persuade other
So
people
now,
to your way of thinking.
now that I've just changed the dynamic, I'm not telling you to behave. I'm giving you an opportunity to learn the kind of behavior that is going to help you be successful at what you want to be successful at. Now you and I aren't fighting. I'm helping you do what you want to do. I'm giving you the
Right.
power over yourself.
Well, so it's not teaching then, it's facilitating, and
It's
that's really what you're
facilitating.
demonstrating here.
Well, because all these things are habits.
Absolutely.
Now, here's the tough part. This is the tough sell, right? Habits are tough. This is not an easy fix. In fact, I say in my book that you know, as educators, one of our big problems in life is that we keep looking for the magic bullet. What we want is that syringe that we could just put into a kid and fix everything,
Well,
right?
Change overnight.
Yeah,
Right.
well, it doesn't happen. And this is particularly difficult because for you to be successful, you need to develop these skills. First, you need to know them, which helps. But knowing something, knowing what to do, doesn't help you do what you need to do.
Sure.
Right? What you need to do is you need to start developing the habit of doing these things. Right? But more than a habit, you've got to start internalizing. For instance, if you think about, I assume you gentlemen operate motor vehicles?
We do.
Yeah. Not very
So-
well sometimes, but
Okay, but you drove.
He's driven with me.
Who drove the furthest today of the two of you to get
We
here?
drove separately.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, who drove the furthest?
The furthest?
Yeah.
About the same,
about
I
the
think.
same.
About the same. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so I'll pick on you since I've been picking on you.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
So you got in your car this morning, right? Radio on?
Yeah,
Radio's on, okay.
Routine.
How many hands on the wheel?
two. to
Two
start.
at all times?
No, to start.
So let's start, but then usually
Yeah,
one, right,
start the-
the
yeah.
radio's on, telephone, don't lie to me, I'll check.
No, don't
Yes,
lie.
I had my phone
You
on.
had your phone on,
I called
okay?
Joe first
So
thing.
let's see if we can, and did you make any left-hand turns?
Pardon me?
Do you make any-
A few.
A few left-hand turns. Okay, so let me see if I can understand this. You drove an expensive and dangerous piece of equipment on a public highway with one hand, listening to the radio, had your phone on your side, and you're probably thinking about this exciting opportunity you have to interview me
I was
today when
looking
you
forward
got here.
to
Right.
talking to Steve today, definitely.
So you're operating this expensive and dangerous piece of equipment on a public thoroughfare with about all the attention that you pay when you're watching the Orange Housewives of New Jersey on television.
You nailed it, Steve.
Right? So here's the thing. You made some left-hand turns, right? Were you scared to death every time you made a left-hand turn?
No, I was pretty comfortable.
You were pretty comfortable.
Sure.
So, all right, let's go back 10 years when you were 16 and you were just starting to learn how to drive, right? Left-hand
Pretty
turns.
different experience.
Left-hand turns, easy or difficult?
They were pretty terrifying.
Scary.
I remember
right?
them as being terrifying.
Because when you make that left-hand turn, you have to apply all these tremendous skills. You have to think ahead, right? You have to regulate yourself. You have to measure distances. In fact, what you're actually doing is asking yourself about 25 separate questions that you need to answer in order to make a left-hand turn comfortably. And in fact, in order to operate a motor vehicle. But what happens is, all of those questions, you start creating this neural pathway that just shortens the distance on all of these questions. So you're still asking the same 25 questions, but now you're asking it in a nanosecond rather than a minute, right? So what you've done is you've created a habit, and then you've so deeply created that habit, you've internalized
That
it.
I've internalized
You
it,
don't
right.
even think about it anymore. Half the time when you drive home, when you're driving the same path every day, you pull up in your driveway and you say, what?
Right,
How'd I
right.
get here?
Yeah, there have been a few
All
of
of that
those.
is that internalization, and it takes years to internalize these things.
So, you know, Steve, to pick, first of all, I didn't get a chance yet to really introduce you. I mean, you've been teaching for many years. You've been in principal, assistant principal,
I was an assistant principal.
and you've taught in New Jersey, you've taught in New York City.
I've taught in New York City.
So you've got a lot of experience, and you were language arts, if I'm not mistaken, and also
Right.
journalism.
Yes.
And at some point
Right.
a little later, I'm going to ask you where all this came from, because I'm sure it grows from that experience. But right now, I think what I want to talk about is the whole concept of mindfulness,
Right.
which is what we want everybody to be. But we
Right.
have to realize that people can't be mindful of everything that goes on in their lives. So a successful human being is a combination, a constructive combination of mindfulness and constructive habit. Isn't that right?
Well, absolutely. So again, sort of coming back to this whole idea of teaching people to internalize these habits, or creating habits, then internalizing the habits. The reason that you internalize these habits is because you want to drive. You want to be a safe driver. You want to accomplish these things, so you work at it. It doesn't come like this.
Sure.
It takes years to become a competent driver, to become, maybe not years, but it takes a long time to
It
become
takes
a
a while.
competent driver, depending on who the driver
In my
is.
case, you have to bang into a few things. before you
Absolutely,
become a
right.
competent driver.
Hopefully cheap things.
Yeah, a few
Right.
cheap things, yeah.
But the whole thing is that what we don't do is we don't engage enough with kids in getting them to devise their own future, and then help them begin to apply these habits in a conscious way toward the specific things that they want. I'll use an example if I can.
Please.
And this happens actually a parental example. My wife, my beautiful wife over here, and we have a son who, when he was a young man, wanted to be a baseball player. You know, but he didn't see himself as being good enough to be a professional player, but he wanted to play in college. That was his dream, right? So around the time he was 13 or 14 years old, he tried out for a local all-star team. And they gave him a tryout. They told him after the tryout they'd like him to be a part of the team, but that not to expect that he was going to be playing right away.
Right.
He's going to have to work at it. He's got skills, but he's got to develop his skills. And then they talked about their practice schedule, which was pretty intense. And he came home and he said to me, "I don't want to do it." I said, "Okay, you don't have to do it." I said, he said, "Why don't you want to do it?" I said, "Well, because I don't want to give up all my free time. I want to hang out with my friends. I want to do that stuff." I said, "That's great. That's an excellent choice. Let me ask you a question, Ben." I said, "Years ago, a couple of years ago, you told me that you had a dream of playing in college." He said, never mind. He said, I'll do the team. I said, no, don't do the team.
Don't
I said,
get down your
right.
head.
I said,
I've had that
he said-
conversation with
he
my
said-
kids.
But he says,
I
no, he
totally
said, but
get
I
that.
understand. He said, I understand what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
He said, all he was able to do was when I asked him the critical question, not what you want today,
Right.
but what you want down the road. How does the decision you make today impact what you want down the road? If you still want to play in college, what do you need to do today to start moving in the direction of getting to where you want to go? Doesn't guarantee you'll get there, but it does guarantee that you've taken power over your life.
Well, that's it. I mean, if your life is an airplane, you're the pilot, not the flight attendant.
Absolutely.
And that means you have to make all these choices. So in working with your son in that case, it was facilitating him to make a choice with a broad horizon rather than teaching him what to think.
All I did was give him the question in which he could put the context of the decision he had to make.
Right.
So that it wasn't just the moment, it was the moment and further down the road. Now sometimes you say, well, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. No problem. And even if you change your mind later on, it doesn't mean you're done, because one of the things that happens is that, I don't know, I don't want to sound like I'm an intellectual here, because it's a dirty word
Well,
these
you
days.
know, I mean,
But
go ahead if you want
Soren
to.
Kierkegaard says that difficulty with life is that it has to be lived forward, but understood backwards. Right? So you have to be able to look ahead in your life and say, there's this place I want to go. And then, in retrospect, you may see that there's these ups and downs and ins and out, right? You're always either moving toward what you want or away from what you want if you're taking control of your life.
Sure.
And you're never more than one decision away from moving in the direction of your successes. No matter how screwed up you are,
Right.
anytime you want to get off the schneid, as they say,
Sure.
make a positive decision in pursuit of something that you want, and you're suddenly going from downward toward upward. And again, it doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. One of the things I do with kids at the beginning of the school year is I always ask them what grade they want. I ask them to write it down. The only reason I want to do that is because I want them to have it. I want it on paper.
Right.
Right. So the simple question is, do you want an A? Most kids want an A, right? And yet, as you guys know as professional educators, almost certainly many of the children that want those A's aren't going to get them. They're not that difficult to get, right? And most teachers nowadays don't play this game. We'll have 3 A's. Who's going to work hardest for it? You earn an A, you get an A,
Yeah, you
right?
get an A.
So what happens is that kids don't see the relationship between the decisions that they make in September and the outcomes that they get, right? They don't see themselves as empowered, and this is one of the things that successful kids see. They see themselves as having power over their lives. Unsuccessful kids see their lives as having power over them, right?
There's something beyond instant gratification, too.
Absolutely. But that's the whole point. You can't give up instant gratification if you don't believe that you're going
Something
to
better.
get what you want.
Yeah.
And I tell kids, just because you can get an A in my class without doing anything. You can not show up in a single class, not do a single paper, not do a single homework, not take a test, not do anything, and you could still get an A. You only have to do one thing.
What's that?
Okay.
You have to pray.
Seriously.
You have to pray. You have to pray that when I'm about to put the grades out, right, I have a little bit of a mini stroke.
You're right. And so,
Oh, right.
And the only letter I can
Al,
remember is A.
Al got an A,
Yeah,
right? Al got
I
an
lost
A,
all the
right?
other letters of the
Right.
alphabet.
But here's the problem.
Uh,
Who's in charge of your life,
in that case,
Right.
somebody else.
You are,
and that's it, and
exactly.
that's what,
right? But
Yep.
if you take matters into your own hand, no matter where you get in life, even if you don't get all the way to where you want to go, you still are in charge of your life. You make the decisions, and you have the benefit, the double benefit, not just of moving toward the goals that you set for yourself, but of developing this powerful coterie of skills that help you go beyond that moment, always.
Where in the history of you being a language arts teacher did this occur to you?
This occurred to me one day when I was making my bed.
Okay.
Okay.
Talk about that.
Okay. So I mentioned to you that teaching was a career I kind of wandered into. I began my professional life in the arts. I briefly wanted to be an actor, and then what I really wanted to be was a writer, and I was not able to to do that, simply because I couldn't apply these skills. I had ability. All my life I've been told I had this ability to be a good writer. I'm good with language. I'm good with expressive language. And I could never get it together, right? I could never figure out how to get it done. I would think, I have a great idea for a novel, and I'd sit down and I'd write a paragraph, and it was the paragraph that I had thought about, and then I'd write the next paragraph, and it would be terrible, and I'd say, well, I have no talent. Throw it out, right? I never understood how to apply persistence. I never understood it. So without getting into the whole story, then it's a long story.
Okay.
One morning, I got up, and I decided, and I never used to make my bed. I decided to make my bed. Right? I just woke up and I said, I've got to make my bed. I can't live this way anymore. Got up, I made my bed, and suddenly I had this tremendous feeling of accomplishment. And I realized that all of my life, what I keep doing is I kept looking at the big picture of what I wanted to write a novel, but I never understood in here. I understood it in here, but I didn't understood it in here. The relationship between little victories adding up to a big victory. I always saw things as needing a big victory. Now, fortunately, I didn't learn this till I was in my mid-20s. Fortunately, because I became a teacher. So the distance between learning these critical skills and using these critical skills as a teacher was much shorter than most people get. Right?
Okay.
So I really became aware of how I became a success. And I ended up writing 3 novels. Now, they weren't published, but I wrote 3 novels.
You accomplished it, though.
And you know, sadly, I didn't become the famous writer that I wanted to be. But happily, I learned so much about power over my own life and about success and about, you know, all these internal abilities that I keep writing about.
Persistence, self-regulation, time management, all these things come out of making a simple little task like making a bed,
Right,
or
exactly.
setting a dinner table, or
Exactly. Or being able to see it as part of a larger goal. Like making your bed is only an important thing if you see it as a way of getting your life in order.
Yes, I see what you mean. Well,
Right.
that makes sense.
So, because, and now, it's the same thing with driving. You don't think about what you had to do to learn how to drive. Well, here's kind of the problem. Some parents and some teachers are not as effective at teaching critical success skills because they're too successful. They don't remember the struggle anymore. Now, you know, as I told you before, when there is a Nobel Prize for education, I'm going to win it because, this is why.
There should be a Nobel
Don't,
Prize for
there should be, and I'm going to win it when there is one.
I get it.
And I'm going to win it because of Steve Heisler's theory of attenuated relationships, which
Okay.
is a brilliant theory.
Okay, let's hear it.
Right? The further you are away from something that you used to do, the more brilliant you are at what you used to do when you
That's
used to do it.
interesting.
Right? So like when a teacher becomes an administrator, they really forget what an incredible struggle it is to be an effective teacher. And they walk into a classroom, they watch a teacher teach, and they say, well, I would do this, and I would do that, and I would do this, and I would do that. Well, which is really easy to do when you're sitting watching.
Sure.
Right? But how do you answer those questions when you're in the midst of the struggle? How do you learn how to become effective? The same thing is true of being a parent. The same thing is true of being a success. If you can't remember the struggle of being successful, you can't teach being successful. And everybody remembers it, they just don't necessarily like to visit it. Right? So one of the things I do with teachers that I'm coaching and working with is I ask them to go back into that driving experience. Go back to when you're 16. It's there. Didn't take you much to find it. A simple question, and you're right there, right? You're right back in that moment. And now you can remember the struggle of internalizing, the struggle of learning, the struggle of becoming an effective driver. And once you have that, you can be much more compassionate in a truthful way to students that are struggling in the same way.
That's really important.
So it's really powerful.
That's great. Oh, we're coming up on the end of our program,
Oh,
Steve.
no.
and I know.
I'm
it's,
just getting warmed
it's
up
hard
here.
To believe. I know. But here's your opportunity to talk into your camera and tell everybody how to reach you.
Okay. You can reach me on my website. It's www.Heisler, SHEISLER.com. That's the best way.
Steve, I'm telling you, you were a great guest. It was just
Thank
great
you
having
so
you.
much. I really
aboard.
appreciate your time.
Steve, it was a pleasure.
Yeah,
meeting you
total
too.
pleasure.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
going to hold your book up one more time. I'm assuming The Missing Link is available, Steve Heisler, on Amazon?
It's available on Amazon and through the publisher R&L Publications. R&L, no, it's what is my publisher? R&L Education Publishers, Roman and Littlefield.
Oh, that's terrific. And it's a great read, not just for teachers, but
Parents.
also for parents.
Right.
And that's it's all about
Yeah,
life skills.
for everybody.
It really is terrific. Great.
Absolutely, everybody should buy this book.
Everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, Steve Heisler, for being with us today on
Thank you so much.
DisruptED TV, and thank all of you for joining us. We hope one or two of the ideas that Steve shared today and in this great interview could be of help to you. I know it'll make me a better driver going home.
I hope so.
My name is Al Cini.
I'm still Joe Osamendi.